Hello, my name is Doug Baker and I am the Director of Sales here at Teledyne Hastings. This year, 2019, marks the 75th anniversary of our company. And a few months ago, we had the honor of meeting Carol Hastings Sanders, the daughter of Charles and Mary Hastings. Carol shared many wonderful stories about her parents during her visit. We took the opportunity to capture some of those remembrances on video. We gave a couple of prompts or questions to get started, but most of what you'll hear is Carol unscripted. We hope you enjoy a few minutes listening to Carol Hastings Sanders.
I am delighted to be here today and to tell you some things about my mother and dad. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. You were absolutely wonderful parents, and you started this fine company. A couple of things about my dad. He was a brilliant engineer, and he was so in love and enthusiastic about the products that were developed here. Enthusiasm was almost his middle name for doing things like this. So he was always like that. He had originally been working after college. He soon came to the NACA, which is the predecessor of NASA, but he wanted to start his own company. Now also at the NACA was my mother. She graduated from the College of William and Mary. My father had come down from Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And at William and Mary, after she graduated, she was hired at what was called at that time to be a computer. Now, in 1940, what a computer was a human, and in this case, they were pretty much all women who knew a lot about math. And they were in one room, and across the hall were the engineers, which included my father, which is how they met. Now, one interesting thing about being a computer for my mother is that she had graduated with a degree in physics with minors in math and chemistry, but she also was a great word person. And as a word person, she knew how to talk to all of the engineers, who many of them could not write their way out of a paper bag. She could talk to them and translate what they wanted to have to do in their reports and proposals and everything into words that people could, the higher-ups who were going to look at them, could understand. An interesting thing about when she went to college is that in addition to her scientific work, William and Mary at that time offered classes in typing and shorthand. Now, everybody today would know what typing is. Shorthand at the time was a very quick way to write down anything people were saying, to take dictation. So she could, and at the time, her academic advisor said, "You shouldn't be taking typing in shorthand. If you take that, it's going to pull your average down and you won't make Phi Beta Kappa." To which my mother replied, "I think typing in shorthand might be more helpful to me in my life than a Phi Beta Kappa key sitting in my jewelry box." Well, when she got to the NACA, she could go across the hall and to where all the engineers were. They would talk to her about what they were supposed to write in their report or their proposal or whatever. She would be quickly jotting it down and understanding everything they were. And so then she would go back and put together what they needed for their reports. And her boss's attitude was, "You are far more important at doing that than being a computer, so go for it." So that's what she did. Then when my father wanted to start a company, she was instrumental in getting this company off the ground. One of the things that she was very good at was organizing and knowing all the details that had to be done. My dad was not a detail person. She would look at a project and realize everything that you were going to need in order to avoid a failure because all of a sudden something that was essential wasn't done. So she was great at that. She, as the company was starting, again was great for her typing in shorthand because she, in the early 40s, would make the company look professional. As the company was getting started, they were trying, another kind of thing that she did is they needed to raise money. The way to raise money in the community was to have the profile of the company raised so that people had heard of it. Well, the way to do that was to get the Daily Press newspaper to write glowing articles about the company. So she would make press releases, about anything that would be a positive thing. She would go down and talk to the reporters and get an article written about it. Now, once these articles came out, another member who was just with the company at the start would use these going around the peninsula talking to anyone he thought might be a potential investor and stockholder. So it was her work in setting up the company getting known that was critical, because he has told me this when I have talked to him. It was critical what she had done to make it possible for him to go around and make the ask to get interviewed or to get investments. That was critical. Another thing getting a company off the ground is, gee, if you have stockholders, you're going to have stockholders meeting. What do people do at a stockholders meeting? Well, they said, okay, we will buy a share in this company, and this company, and this company. And they bought a share in one of the local banks. And Mama said, I will go to a stockholders meeting and see what somebody does at a stockholders meeting. So she went, and there were all these old men sitting around a table, not expecting any investor to show up. And my mom walks in, you know, I'm ready to see the stockholders meeting. And if anything like that came up, you know, she would be there saying, I'll go do that. So she went and did dozens of things because, hey, I'm up for it. That's a kind of way in which she was particularly useful. And around the company, my father was so excited and involved in the things that he was inventing and the products that she would have her ears trained to notice if there was a brush fire starting up somewhere. And if something like that came up and she said, oh, we don't want that to be a problem, then or sometimes my father was so excited he would say, oh, we're going to have this policy. And my mother would think, there are some things you better think about before announcing that policy. And so when they were together, alone, she'd say, you know, Charles, before you announce that policy, have you thought of what effect it would have on this part of the company? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about this other thing? And my dad would, okay, but I guess maybe we better think about this before he announces something that on the spur of the moment sounded great to him. So having her there was absolutely essential to the success of the company. And so, thanks, Mom, and thanks, Dad. You know, you both were, without both of you, this company would not be what it is today. And both of them were always so proud of this company and so excited about what it was doing that pervaded our home life. You saw the radiant interest they had in this company, and so it was great.
Carol, as I read about your father, he strikes me as a real type A personality. He's into everything. He's a brilliant engineer, scientist, yet he's a leader and a manager. He's a marketer, he's a promoter. Did he have a favorite role, and did that favorite role kind of change over time as the company grew?
He loved it all. He always wanted to be working on new products and improving old products. So when he had his office. There in one part of the room was his desk where he did business. But there was also a lab bench right in his office, and it always had stuff all over it that he was working with and thinking about this, but not still working on the engineering part. So that was very important to him. Now, he was very much loved going to a trade show because he loved to crow about the products that they had. So going to a trade show and telling everybody how wonderful the Hastings Instruments was a great joy to him. So he liked to be, sometimes other people went to the trade show as well, or sometimes without him, but if it were at all possible, he'd want to be there on the floor talking to customers.
Did that role ever change over time? I mean, he always was an inventor, always was a tinkerer, right? It's not like his interests went towards finance or towards mergers and acquisitions. It seemed like he always had this knack for inventing.
He did have a knack for inventing, and he had engineers who worked for him working on the development. But one of them was telling me when I was interviewing him, and this was a couple of years after my father had died, that every day my father would come into his office and say, "How's it going on this?" or "How's it going on that?" Because in addition to what he would play with and experiment with at his own lab bench in his office, there was someone he worked with every day, and that guy was so pleased that he said, every day your dad came in to say, what's up? And so that worked very well. My father liked the business part of it. An interesting thing is I was told when I was interviewing people one time, he said, a banker once said of your dad that he was the only engineer he had ever met who was also a good businessman. See? And I think it's because at that time the idea was engineers are often wanting a product to be so perfect before anything is released or anything is done or any possible thing that could be improved. It might be too long before the market would do it, or too expensive before the market would be willing to pay for it. But to be an engineer who was interested in, I need a product on the table next month, or I need a product that costs less than so many $100, that's something that some engineers get and some engineers don't. And my dad did it. And from a banker's point of view, they thought that was an important aspect of whether they wanted to loan money to the company.
As I look at the amazing collection of pictures in your book, I get the sense that your parents were two of the most charismatic people on the planet, very outgoing. Are those pictures accurate? Could you tell me a little bit about the personalities that built this company?
Okay. My dad was a charismatic person, partly because he loved what he was doing so much, and he was eager to talk to people about it. I just recall one time, and this is back in the 50s, and I noticed just a few years ago that my mom had a little diary she had kept, and she was commenting about, we were on a flight, and this is a time where not all that many people flew, and so the bulk of the people who were flying were businessmen. And she says, by the time we ended the flight, Charles had pretty much gone around selling the idea of how wonderful his products were to everybody on the flight, that he wanted to talk to them and he wanted to tell them about what he did. And he was so excited about what he did that made the charisma. My mother was not that kind of charismatic. My mother was somebody who generated enormous respect for her broad view of things, her fairness, her decency, that they recognized the essential role that she had in making this company a success. So everybody respected her. Oh, and I remember something my older brother told me once, that this is in the early 50s, and there was a time when somebody came up to my dad, a person who was only ever interested in talking to men, and asked something about, I don't know what issue it was, and what my dad said, well, my wife handles that. Go over and talk to Mary. The guy was not quite sure that that was what he was used to, but my dad wasn't giving him a choice. If that was something my mother knew about and not him, she was the one to go talk to.
Carol, I want to thank you for your time with us today. This has been an absolute joy for all of us. I hope you enjoyed your time here with us and enjoyed the tour. But before we go, I wonder if you could comment on what your parents would say about what you've seen here today. What do you think would have caught their eye?
They would have been so happy to see that 75 years later, this company is still thriving. They would have absolutely loved that. As I walked around, I was wishing they could see it. And particularly when we went back to where the engineering section was, and we were talking with the people who are now doing the engineering development, I looked at those people and said, my dad would have loved to meet you people. That it was, they looked like his kind of guys. That would have made them happy. And those are the two things I particularly thought of as I went around today.
Outstanding. Thank you very much.